Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What happened at your workplace to cause mass quits, Part 5. Was doing relief work for another site in a franchise. The general manager of that particular site was mediocre for the last 6 months, and the employee turnover was higher. I was sent over there to brand train the staff and address any issues with health and safety compliance along with another chef from our site. The manager was, upon our arrival, nothing short of a butch. She was expecting more from the staff, some of whom had never worked in a working kitchen before, and others who had only been there for a few weeks. Nevertheless, she decides it's the ideal time to pull a kitchen in the middle of the summer rush, about 25 tickets in the kitchen and an hour wait on tables. For some silly reason I can't recall, the chef and porter come out of the kitchen and start chewing their A's loudly in the middle of the meal. The two bolt to the changing area, clearly seeing red. The chef pauses briefly before turning around and walking straight up to the fire suppression system where he pulls the manual cord. It immediately spews out 200 liters of foam and shuts down for 3 days. 10 years ago, I worked in my first tattoo parlor. The guy that owned it cut corners and wasn't even a tattoo artist. Even worse, he attempted to micromanage the artist, which is frowned upon in the business. About 6 people were brought on by the man, and toward the end, a 7th. 50% of each artist's pull was paid to the shop, not including advice. We were told to charge sales tax on the tattoos we completed. This was strange because tattoos are not subject to that level of taxation. We were all in charge of our own taxes because we were essentially contractors for the shop. He brought it up in several shop meetings, and 3 other artists and I told him no way, no way. 2 employees were let go for not increasing their pay by 10%, not even a week after the previous meeting. Even though those 2 were indolent in any case, they reported the owner to the state. After about a week, 1 more person was fired for the same reason. He had only 3 top earners left at this point, and he had not yet informed us that he would be imposing taxes. The 3 of us got down the following week and talked about the possibility of quitting the shop. When I returned the following day, a state auditor is in the shop probing the proprietor's methods. It goes without saying that after we all told, we started packing. My friend who ran another store in the neighborhood told me I had a spot at his store when I called him. As we were loading our S, the owner comes down frantic and angry. Says something about suing us for allegedly breaching a fictitious contract. He attempted to get us to sign a non-complete agreement, but all of the employees told him to screw off. In any case, it was the best feeling to have my boys there to support him when he lost his last 3 tattoo artists. 1 month passed. He attempted to have my license revoked, failed. After his shop closed, the landlord caught him renting it out to growers of illegal plants. In essence, this jerk was collecting huge sums of money while doing nothing and expecting us to pay his taxes in addition to our own. Nah. For roughly 6 months, I was employed at a convenience store in a small town. In addition to operating a profitable small business, the owners chose to purchase and renovate the gas station that had been shuttered for a few years. After a month after its reopening, I joined. It was a quiet night for business, with most residents of the town coming in for dinner or a beer. Many of these individuals are friends with both my late grandmother and grandfather, and I really enjoyed our conversations. The issue stemmed from the owner's adamant opposition to any form of relaxation while working. 10 cigarette breaks per day were acceptable, though. If you had thoroughly cleaned the store, sweeping, mopping, filling the coolers, wiping down the tables, etc., and there were several hours between customers, they would still prefer that you be working on a job-related task. Nothing, no phones, no newspapers. We would sell a lot of the lunch specials that the store would regularly run. Our manager, me on the front end, and the 2-person kitchen were nearly unable to keep up. Our owners felt that 4 people was excessive and that there should only ever be 2, 1 in the front and 1 in the kitchen. The manager ought to remain in her office. Fortunately, the manager disregarded them. When the owners took a vacation to the state fair, that was the turning point. We realized we couldn't continue doing this when I received a call from them asking why I was on my phone while they were at the state fair. The store was being watched by cameras that they could view remotely. We three put in our 2 weeks at nearly the same time. They pleaded with us to stay, but we had all moved on to better things. The owners had rejected the manager's offer to increase my pay from $9 per hour to $11 per hour and give me more responsibilities. The store's owners now have to work certain hours, and one of the longtime employees told me recently that she had worked 2 weeks because they don't appreciate good help. Although I enjoyed that job, the owners of the small convenience store were too strict. The event in question took place not too long ago, exactly 1 month ago. At the restaurant where I worked, the proprietor came to the conclusion that it would be a fantastic idea to continue opening more locations within a 20-mile radius just because the restaurant was so popular. On the whole, there were 6 different locations, and there was one central kitchen that would prepare everything and send it to the restaurants. This was done to ensure consistency, and because the kitchens in the restaurant were not exceptionally large. The situation became even more dire when the proprietor began withdrawing funds from the bank account that was being used to pay the employees in order to open additional locations in a variety of states and countries. Irrespective of the fact that he had approximately 100 employees spread out across 10 different locations, he did not possess sufficient funds to pay all of them. Our first paychecks for the previous month arrived 1.5 weeks late, and when we finally got them, they fell through the mail. All of them bounced. The second paycheck arrived, and they were also 1.5 weeks behind schedule. And they still bounced. The workers continued to hold out hopes that they would receive a substantial paycheck, but it took a very long time for it to arrive. A mass email was sent out by the proprietor pleading with everyone to maintain their composure and not allow the situation to spiral out of control. A month had passed since any of us received our paychecks. Additionally, our suppliers were not being paid, which resulted in us not receiving deliveries and being perpetually short on approximately half of the menu items. There was a precipitous increase in the number of people quitting, and some of them went to the news and revealed the information. There was a lot of news about us, and customers kept asking about it. Additionally, more people quit their jobs. The majority of the employees working in the central kitchen left their positions, which meant that nobody was preparing food and distributing it to the hotels and restaurants. Depending on whether or not we have our primary supplies, 5 of the restaurants have permanently closed their doors, while the remaining restaurants close on a more or less regular basis. In the end, we were paid, but the damage had already been done. As a result of the owner's greed, the restaurant's reputation was damaged, and the establishment continues to suffer the consequences of having made such foolish decisions. You did a fantastic job. Americans, what is your most horrific encounter with the Homeowners Association / Neighbors from H, Part 5? Imagine you are me, a person from a lowly middle class who is located in a VHCOL. I spent years putting money aside for a small family home so that I could move in and start a family. After negotiating my way through 25 other offers, I ended up paying 15% more than I had asked for. Upon moving in, I went to meet my elderly neighbor. She appeared to be completely consistent. After some time had passed, I finally took my boat out of storage. An approximately 21-foot-long wakeboard that's 30 years old. It was placed in the area that's located to the right of my driveway. I couldn't be more thrilled that I was able to secure a location where I could carry out that activity. When my elderly neighbor finally pulled out of my driveway a few hours later, he asked, "Is that gonna be a permanent fixture?" I responded, "Probably." When I get back out, I'm unable to see the road, which is followed by, "There's not much I can do about that." For the past few years, this elderly neighbor has developed a frown whenever he sees me. Consequently, you can imagine how surprised I was when another neighbor knocked on my door. After receiving a letter in the mail, he learned that a neighborhood coalition is forming in order to file a lawsuit against me for parking my boat in my driveway. I was not aware of the CC&Rs that were being referenced. I was able to locate them at the bottom of my title paperwork, a document that's 50 years old and can be used as grounds for a lawsuit against me. RVs and boats can be found everywhere you look. Just now, I have a terrible neighbor. In any case, I will be contacting a real estate attorney. Also, please remind me to steer clear of homeowners associations and communities that are governed by CC&Rs. Edit. So the plot thickens. We did have a conversation with the neighbors who live to our left. We'll refer to them as Steve. Steve also received a letter from an unknown sender, but the authors do not own the property. Therefore, they return the letter to the owner of their property, who's the individual pictured on the right, the elderly community member. Consequently, this indicates that she was not the one who sent it out, right? It's on my to-do list to go talk to her one-on-one in order to listen to any concerns she may have. Moreover, I had a conversation with a property attorney, and it turned out that the letter was written by someone in a different CCR, which means that they cannot sue me. My immediate neighbors are the only ones who can. There's a person who's so enraged that they have sent multiple letters to each and every one of my neighbors. My new neighborhood is non-HOA, but there are CCRs that specifically limit this. A well-maintained boat in the driveway doesn't bother me personally. A few houses away, a neighbor really irritated their immediate neighbor by parking their RV in the driveway. In an attempt to force them to move it behind a fence or store somewhere else, those neighbors tried to contact the city code enforcement. Since CCRs are not covered by the municipal codes that code enforcement is tasked with enforcing, they declined to become involved and suggested that this is a civil matter rather than a code matter. These neighbors found out that their complaint would need to be resolved through legal action. As a result of the difficulty in filing a lawsuit without incurring hefty legal fees, it appears that there's no way to enforce this CCR because our HOA lacks the authority to impose fines and penalties. OP, I'd make an effort to be a good neighbor and work with this woman to find a compromise. If that turns out to be unfeasible, simply wait for the lawsuit. It won't happen. Over the course of 6 business days, our HOA was responsible for the removal of 30 trees. A total of 72 trees are going to be felled by them. Trees that were 47 years old, well established, and resistant to drought made up the majority of those that had already been cut down. There are no plans with the HOA to remove the stumps, no plans to replace the trees, and no plans to reduce the amount of slope erosion that has occurred as a result of the stumps. In the state of California, as well as in our county and city, there are existing laws that pertain to trees. It would appear that tree laws must only be enforced on public lands and not on private properties. Even though we issued a cease and desist order, we were unable to convince them to stop. After our conversation, the mayor of our local city asked the city attorney to provide a response. Our congresswoman was also a part of our conversation. No matter what they tried, they were unable to prevent the trees from being cut down. We've initiated a recall of the 3 members of the HOA board who were the driving force behind this action. The 2 other members of the board made a no vote and argued against performing this action. The voting took place on a Thursday evening, and the tree cutting ceremony began the following morning. There was no communication between them and the homeowners regarding their intention to cut down the trees. Tree trimming and maintenance was called out as the item on the agenda. It would appear that we're stuck with these board members until replacement board members are elected, because even with a recall petition, we're stuck with them. A meeting with the HOA attorney's taken place. It would appear that we have very little power to put a stop to the slaughter. They suggest filing a lawsuit against the HOA. It'll take years for our landscaping to recover from the loss of the trees that they've already cut down, even if we are successful in our endeavors. Also, we've sought the advice of an arborist. It was his opinion that the trees that were cut down were not required to be cut down. As a result of our development, we've lost the owls, red-tailed hawks, and other birds that nest in our area. The increased noise from the freeway and the heat that's reflected off the concrete driveways are already noticeable. The weather's been cloudy for the past couple of weeks, and this summer is going to be unbearably hot. F homeowners associations and tyrants who join boards of directors in order to gain power over other residents. I love reading agreements and contracts, so when a friend told me that his HOA was making it hard for him to keep his boat behind his house, I jumped at the chance to read it. I discovered that they have very little authority to impose what they cannot see from the road, which impacts property value, after reading, researching, and discovering a few rulings. He brought my supporting documentation to the HOA and asked them to waive his fines. After a few months, he paid a real estate attorney $2,000 to go around the HOA, and they eventually backed down, removed his fines, and let him keep his boat. They had refused, claiming that the agreement says nag, nag, nag. Then, in an act of pure vindictiveness, we constructed a 40-foot tall temporary structure using my design that complied with the building code and HOA agreement in order to fly a flag on an additional 25-foot pole. For a year, we took it down and put it back up every 3 months. It was visible from nearly every location in the neighborhood. It's truly amazing and truly triumphant. If you want to watch the part 4, click the link here. I'm very, very glad to see you all in the comments again. And many thanks for support.